Si Corona entrait au Congo, ce serait encore pire, ce serait grave. Grave parce que il n'y a pas d'installation médicale capable de gérer ces crises. Il n'y en a pas. Goma, par exemple, ma ville ici, elle est habitée par plus ou moins 1 million d'habitants. Avec combien d'hôpitaux?
I thought this was excellently crafted. Really clean, clear storytelling in the progression of time, and it really dropped me back into the beginning of the emergence of coronavirus. That very palpable fear and unease about it, building up, building up. Everywhere you turned was conversations about it, and it really did flip life upside down. And I think they tapped into the emotions of that time so well, while balancing it with information as well. So I think it was a really nice pairing there, good balance. Um, and in the Congo, all of those fears are exacerbated to the nth degree because of that lack of prepared medical institutions and systems in place. And to see how it permeated throughout the area with a really wide array of perspectives in art and culture, in the medical field, in business, in the everyday person, I felt like it was a very like on the ground, comprehensive, and thorough exploration of this time where they really hit the ground running with it. It it would have been really interesting to see this perspective from so many different cultures. So I love that I got this deep dive into how it all unfolded in the Congo.
The misconceptions about COVID existed in Africa. For example, the idea that only white people were susceptible to the virus, which is some of the misinformation that was shared in the beginning when information on this was scarce. And this documentary, started off as one thing, and then the documentary team gets stuck once the Congo goes into lockdown. So you're seeing them sort of capturing what's happening in essence around this time, but also seeing their own personal struggles to try to leave the place and not being able to. There was a lot of concern with how it would affect the less fortunate, and then you see the food prices rise, and you're seeing how this team is dealing with the quarantine and even being outsiders to this area. I liked how they utilized a lot of radio interviews and to really get a sense of the pulse of the frustration, because a lot of people were frustrated by the lack of the planning, the misinformation. And then you see a shift with showing a lot of the different propaganda forms that came out during the time, whether it's the propaganda through like the video, viral video song, or the propaganda through the videos telling people to wash their hands and things like that, where information is starting to be distributed with methods to avoid corona and to fight back against the disease. And then you see how masks were very expensive in this area. It's not something that we thought about much in America, but you know, um, 1,500 francs per mask on a daily basis could really be the choice between having food, soap, or household items, or having a mask and protecting yourself. But then you got to see the innovation of the culture, which is making their own masks. It was definitely interesting to see just the expansion of how this touched this area, from how dire the situation got when you saw people struggling to feed their families and when things started to turn into a place of violence. It was also interesting to see the perception of the crew doing the documentary, the women who were and essentially stuck here away from their own homes and interacting with this place as outsiders, also dealing with what they were dealing with at the same time.
This dives into the touchdown and the following aftermath response of Corona in the Congo, being aware that they don't have the medical resources to take this pandemic on. What's interesting is that you get to see two sides shown at the top of the documentary here. The side of fear to even breathe in the same space of others, and others who have chosen to ignore and not really care or learn about the virus, knowing that they have overcome wars, Ebola. The family here even mentions that they've suffered so much before Corona, it's not really something to be feared. And then as time goes on, we realize that this becomes a global issue in our world. And as we dive in, we get to see the after effects of it. People being forced to stay in a country they don't necessarily plan on staying in full time, and documenting this journey for them during the very early on in the beginning and during this pandemic. We get to see how people who kind of shrugged it off and didn't really think about the virus, how it comes to affect them on a basis of inflation and the price of food going up, and them getting concerned with the amount of food they once got before now being shrunken down due to the issues of the way that the world works in a pandemic, unfortunately. It's something that we get to watch and relate to in many different layers.
It was all about the illustrating of the onset of the COVID restrictions in the Congo, in the town of Goma. The filmmaker, Guyslaine, was there to document her Italian friend's work with children in the community when this began. So it's amazing how this came about. It really got to the bottom of the socioeconomic aspects of a community in a developing nation. And what they go through is a lot different than the Western world. I was amazed at the traffic cop robot that was utilized to direct traffic in town. That really struck me. But more than that, her conclusion and acknowledging her privilege of being born Swiss or from anywhere out of Africa, and how that had not gotten past her. And she wanted to put that out there. I thought that was really smart.
There's a comparison between the Ebola and the coronavirus outbreak. They focus on the city of Goma and some situations with the Rwanda border, the Uganda and Rwanda border. It is a very interesting dive into how governments' reactions and decisions impact different populations. They also touch on abusive police, the water supply, and how prices went up. It was for me very interesting to see how different people also perceived the threat of the pandemic, and also the promotion of conspiracy theories amongst population with different purposes. It was a very nice, very well researched documentary. I enjoyed also how the three women at the end split out, and they had their own reasons to do that, and it was a good exercise or example of how the world collapsed and then was reborn after identifying what to do.
It's interesting to watch it now, considering where we're at now in the pandemic, that it's basically not a pandemic anymore. So it was really interesting to watch this, especially in a different part of the world. Interesting that these journalists just happened to go there in February, right before the pandemic started, and to see their sort of struggle with it and whether or not to leave or stay. And I like that they were able to document what was going on in this part of the country, in Africa and the Congo. I thought there was really nice interviews. It was a very nice pace throughout. It kept my attention, all of the nice camera work, the B-roll, the sound, the lighting. There was a lot of really nice lighting, cinematography. I just thought all the interviews and the visuals with the different things, throughout, as far as the Aimée Festival and just everybody's daily life. I thought it was really well put together, and the scenes were put together well, and the script was really good. The interviews were nice to get a good picture of what was going on. Thought it was very sad about the police brutality. Of course, that happens in so many places, to the point of not even being sort of regulated at all. The script didn't leave me guessing, which I really like. It's like I was told from the beginning why these people were filming this, why they were there, and what was going on as we went along. I liked that it answered my questions if I had any. It didn't leave me guessing.
One of the things that I found really interesting was the way, how recently having to deal with the Ebola crisis and everything. They'd already sort of developed an awareness of combating disease and certain protocols, so they seemed to have slightly more preparation for dealing with COVID, which just goes to show you how different experiences create different outcomes, and how people who are aware of the realities of disease and pandemics were actually a lot better equipped than some other countries who are far more laid back. But at the same time, you also get a sense that there's a lot of unrest and discontent towards how the government was dealing with things, and even though this government was not quite up to scratch, it just goes to show you how COVID was a completely different beast and something kind of unprecedented that nobody quite knew what to do with. So it's really interesting to see that play out in different areas, and also seeing police take advantage of the situation to exercise their power, and these stories of police brutality, which are horrible, just kind of goes to show all the nasty things that are going on at the same time as well. And even like the idea that people didn't have access or couldn't get enough frequent access to water when you kind of need it to wash your hands and quite often, it's like that's just very eye-opening. So I just think it's a really, really, really interesting, compelling portrait of how another part of the world dealt with the pandemic and how that helps us understand both the pandemic as a whole and the rest of the world.